The Fall Route, Station 4. Get your senses intoxicated with the fumes rising from the grape stomp in Wimbron. But do not taste the nectar of the grapes, unless you wish to lose yourself. Riley and I were headed to a vineyard in Alsace, France, the fourth stop on the Fall Route. So far, every bit of creepypasta about these places had checked out, which wasn't exactly comforting. Crossing the border into France, I felt this tight knot in my chest. Just 3 more stops and this whole nightmare would be over. Then we could head back to the States with a decent payout and get back to our usual grind, making videos about exploring abandoned places. Riley pointed at the weathered sign on the roadside. La Reine Noire. That's it. Must be pretty well known if they've got billboards all over town. Wimbron looked like it had been plucked from a postcard. Narrow streets, flower boxes spilling over the windows, those half-timbered houses Alsace is famous for. There was at first glance nothing special about it. Just an idyllic place that would make a great choice for a honeymoon. I'd learned not to trust first impressions. The road wound up a soft green hillside covered in grapevines. Late afternoon sunlight gave the valley a golden glow. It was warm enough to keep the windows down. Riley was filming as we pulled into the gravel drive. From the outside, the place looked like the opposite of the backdrop for a creepypasta. A group of men and women stood in front of the big wooden door. The women were dressed in elegant flowy dresses, while the men wore suit pants and dress shirts. All of them were holding glasses of dark red wine. Looks like the party's already started. Let's go, Leo. Riley reached for the door handle, but I stopped her with a hand on her arm. Hang on, Riles. We need an escape plan this time. We check out the place, film the grape stomp, then get to the hotel. I'm not waiting for something to go wrong again. She just shrugged and smiled, like I was overreacting. I couldn't figure out how she was still so calm after everything that had happened. All right then, I muttered, grabbing the camera bag and trailing after Riley toward the house. The place was old but well kept, the half-timbered beams dark against whitewashed walls. The front door's wooden frame was carved with grapevines and curling leaves. No one even glanced at us when we stepped inside. The reception desk was unattended. We walked around in the entrance hall. The walls were lined with old photographs showing groups of harvesters posing in front of endless rows of grapevines, clutching heavy wooden baskets filled with grapes. Look at this. This must be the founder, Riley said, pointing to a framed portrait. It was a black and white photo of a young woman in a 19th century dress. Her hair was braided into 2 long plaits that rested on her shoulders. Her piercing stare was pointed right at the camera. It almost felt as if she was looking at us. Welcome. I am Elodie, the manager of the vineyard. Are you here for the midnight grape stomp? The voice came from behind us. I turned to see an older woman enter the hall. She was dressed with a kind of old-fashioned elegance, pearl earrings, blazer, and glasses. Her graying hair was pinned in a twist at the back of her head. That sounds interesting. Riley's eyes flicked toward me, and I felt my stomach sink. We just talked about not sticking around, but I knew that look. She really wanted to go. Right, yeah, that's what we're here for, I said, forcing a smile. Riley grinned at me in a way that made it hard to say no, no matter how much I wanted to. I pulled out the camera, switching it on. Riley slipped into her on-camera voice, cheerful and curious, and asked the woman about the black and white portrait on the wall. Elodie's eyebrows lifted as her gaze shifted to the portrait. It's a tragic story, she said, her voice soft. Mademoiselle Elise was the daughter of the man who built this vineyard. She was a beautiful young woman, meant to marry well, but her fiancé never returned from the Great War. Troubled times, she added with a small shake of her head. No one could console the young mademoiselle, and when they found her body inside one of the old oak barrels, Elodie paused. It was terrible. They say she climbed in herself before it was sealed. She drowned before anyone could reach her. Her tone stayed calm, almost formal, as if she'd told this story 100 times before. Her father never recovered. He even renamed the estate in her memory. La Reine Noire, the Black Queen. Elodie's face settled back into that composed elegance. Now that you know our histoire, you can go on and enjoy our present. I'll show you to the sun deck, where you can sample last year's wine and wander the vineyard until it's time for the stomp. We stepped outside and were greeted by classical music. In the far corner of the wide deck, a woman with long black hair sat playing a cello. It sounded celebratory, but there was something heavy about it. There had to be 60 people out there already, all dressed in muted colors. I took off my green hoodie, hoping I'd stand out less, but it didn't really help. I tried not to notice the way some people glanced at me as if I'd wandered in by mistake. This wasn't my world. I stuck to what I was good at, filming Riley while she moved from table to table, sampling the wines with that natural charm that got our videos so many clicks. The afternoon turned into a pretty boring evening. Then a metallic chime cut through the crowd, the tap of metal on glass. Elodie stood in the center of the deck, flanked by several workers dressed in black uniforms. They were pushing a massive wooden barrel on a cart. The barrel was wrapped in a wreath of black roses. "Dear guests," Elodie announced, "I present to you the highlight of the season, last year's Reine Noire." Polite applause rippled through the audience. I joined in, pretending to know what we were clapping for. Elodie picked up a copper spigot, pressed it to the barrel's side, and nodded to one of the workers. He hammered it in with a wooden mallet. A gush of wine burst out, dark and sticky, splashing over Elodie's hands and filling the chalice she held beneath it. The wine must have been very mature. It was almost black. Its color reminded me of ink. The moment Elodie stepped back, the guests pushed forward as if they'd been waiting all day just for this. People leaned over each other to reach the barrel first, holding out their glasses with little patience. I even saw a man in a tailored linen suit elbow past an older woman without so much as an apology. For a crowd that looked like they belonged on the front page of a magazine for wine connoisseurs, they acted strangely desperate, almost greedy for that inky wine. I stayed where I was, filming the scene. When Riley started to move towards the barrel, I gently caught her shoulder. "Riles, let's not try this stuff. Who knows what's in it? I'm still not over that meal in Transylvania. And that wine you had in Valombra, that wasn't normal either, all right?" She hesitated, a flicker of resistance in her eyes, but finally nodded. "You're right, I guess. Let's stay safe this time." Elodie raised her own glass high, her tone carrying enough weight to quiet the crowd. "Enjoy this memorable wine," she said. "Those who have tasted it know it is life-changing. If you wish to see more of our winery, there will be guided tours you can join later. They will end with the midnight stomp." Around us, people emptied their glasses and went for a refill. Within minutes, I noticed the shift. Shoulders relaxing, posture loosening. Polite smiles turned into louder laughs. It was subtle at first, but the refinement that had made them seem so untouchable began to slip away. It hadn't been long enough for anyone to actually be drunk. Riley and I signed up for a tour. At that point, I just wanted to get off the terrace, away from all those perfectly dressed strangers. We waited until most of the guests had finished the glasses. Then a teenager approached us. Judging by his face, he couldn't have been older than 15. "I am Edouard. Please follow me for your tour." He wore a top hat that seemed a size too big, but somehow he carried it with a confidence that made it work. A few tipsy guests joined our group, but they stayed in their own circles as we began descending the narrow stone steps into the winery's cellars. A cold rush hit me as soon as we stepped down. The only light came from flickering candles set into the walls. Whoever had designed this tour had gone all in on the century-old winery vibe. Edouard led us past rows of stacked barrels, and I was hit by a smell that made my stomach twist. Sweet, like fruit left out in the sun until it had started to rot. The other guests drifted off into smaller rooms, apparently assigned to different wines, and Edouard didn't seem to notice or care. He kept talking about grapes, wood types, aging processes, but I barely listened. There was a faint noise that caught my attention, a faint rhythmic drip, like a faucet that hadn't been fully closed. "Do you hear that?" I whispered to Riley. She froze for a moment, listening, then nodded. "It's coming from over there," She pointed towards the far side of the long wall of barrels. I could just make out a narrow opening leading to another dark room. I didn't want to offend Edouard with my disinterest, so I inched closer, careful not to draw attention. Riley followed quietly. When we reached the doorway, the dripping stopped. Riley flicked on her phone's light. I adjusted the camera to capture what little light we had. The lens focused on the room. At first, it seemed like there was nothing out of the ordinary, just lines of barrels. But when I went inside, I stepped into something wet. Riley must have felt it too. She pointed down the torchlight. I swallowed hard. We were standing in a puddle of something blackish that felt thick and sticky like jello. Someone must have opened the door somewhere in the cellar because there was a gust of air that carried a foul, sweet scent that made me gag. "What is this stuff?" I muttered. "Maybe one of the barrels is leaking? We should tell Edouard about it." I nodded, absent-mindedly, but I knew that wine is not supposed to smell like this. I was about to turn around and leave when Riley grabbed my arm. "Look at this, Leo." Her voice was trembling. Through the camera lens, I looked at what she wanted to show me. One of the barrels was open. Through the crack, the surface of the black liquid inside reflected the light. The barrel head was lying on there, and on it, a black handprint. I took a step backwards, pulling Riley with me. I scanned the darkness in the room, listened. But I couldn't hear or see anyone here with us. Maybe this was supposed to be part of the tour to troll the visitors? My heart stopped for a moment when I heard the voice in my back. It took me a second to understand that it was Edouard. "And this is the room where we keep our famous Reine Noire to age." Edouard didn't give any sign that he noticed how shaken I was. My heart was still hammering as we rejoined the group, following the tour through the winding corridors. None of the other visitors seemed to notice anything strange. They chatted, laughed, completely unbothered. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something lurked in the dark corners we passed. Something or someone watching. I kept Riley close and noticed she was unusually quiet. I told myself it was just the eerie atmosphere of the cellars. At the end of the corridor, Edouard opened a door. Relief washed over me. It led out into the garden. The sun had gone down, leaving the full moon to bathe the 5 wooden vats on the paved courtyard in cold silver light. "Ready to get your feet wet?" Edouard asked, handing out plastic covers. I wasn't in the mood. I wanted nothing more than to turn around and head straight to the car. But Riley's eyes lit up. She grabbed a pair of covers. This was exactly what she'd been looking forward to. I decided to stay on the sidelines, filming her stomping grapes and keeping an eye on the open cellar door. One by one, people stepped into the vats. The squish of grapes filled the night air. Soon, a heavy, almost suffocating scent rose from the vats, much stronger than I had expected. The guests started to giggle and jump around. The elegant, restrained men and women I'd watched earlier now threw mashed grapes at each other, pressed them into mouths, smeared them across their faces as if they couldn't get enough. I watched, uneasy, as Riley stomped happily in her own vat, occasionally glancing at the chaos around her. I pointed the camera back at her, telling myself I'd get a few more shots and then we could leave. We owed our followers a new video about the fall route, after all. But then, a flicker on the camera screen made me freeze. Something had moved there in the video feed. Damn it. I hoped the camera wasn't glitching. I walked back toward my big camera bag by the cellar entrance, bending down to grab a different lens. That's when I saw something on the grey concrete tiles. A footprint, dark red like the half-mashed grapes. My gaze followed the trail leading straight back into the cellar. I blinked. Those hadn't been there when we came through the door earlier. I looked at Edouard. He was quietly watching the chaos in the vats, completely unbothered. Riley seemed fine too, stomping happily in her own vat. I thought about asking her to come with me, but I dropped the idea. I didn't want to spook her. It would only take a minute to see where this led. My heartbeat picked up as I stepped into the candlelit corridor. Behind me, laughter and shrill voices from the vats echoed through the cellar. The footprints wound around the corner to the room with the long line of barrels. My stomach sank. They led straight to that creepy room Riley and I had checked out earlier. I paused, thinking for a moment. I should have turned around, kept Riley safe. but I needed to know what this was. I preferred that Riley did not have to face it herself this time. I also felt guilty because I was usually the one telling her that we should turn around and leave if something felt off. Here I was, making my way to that room, turning on the flashlight of my phone to be able to see anything. I carefully avoided the puddle on the floor, but the footprints led right into it. Maybe someone had just come a bit later and stepped into it? Sounded logical, but I didn't believe it. I moved the light across the room. The trail continued past the big wooden barrels to the back of the room. My pulse started racing. I took one step and held still, listening. Nothing. No movement, no breath. I continued until I reached the corner behind the barrels and gasped. There was a small old wooden door. It stood open. Behind that door wasn't really a room, more like a tiny niche that just fit that one big barrel standing there. It was made from blackened oak wood bound by rusty iron hoops. The cask head bore a faded carving of a crowned woman's profile. It had been opened. Dark residue had seeped out as if the barrel had wept tar. There was a smell of iron and sweet rot in the air choking me. I was debating whether to take a closer look when faint screams echoed from outside. Without thinking, I ran. I sprinted down the corridor and out of the cellar. Moonlight spilled across the vats and the scene that had been full of chaos was gone, completely abandoned. The last of the guests were taking off toward the vineyard rows. I ran after them, pushing past the first few, calling for Riley. But I couldn't catch the front of the group. They had spread across different rows. Laughter and shrieks came from all directions. I screamed Riley's name again and again. No answer. At one point, I stopped, gasping for air. Maybe she hadn't joined this mad race across the vineyard. Maybe she'd gone back to the terrace to look for me. My mind was spinning. I needed to make sense of this. I returned to the house, sweaty and grimy. The terrace where people had been drinking and celebrating was empty. The reception desk was unmanned and there was no sign of Elodie. I headed to the parking lot, hoping Riley might be waiting by the car. Instead, I found Edouard sitting on a bench in front of the house, calmly smoking a cigarette. What's going on here? I couldn't hide my anger. He gestured to the empty space beside him, patting the bench as if inviting me to sit. An odd gesture for a 15-year-old. But I was too drained to argue. I sank down, catching my breath. Elise came out today, he said quietly and blew smoke into the air. What the fuck does that mean? I need to know where my friend is. You better tell me right now. Your girlfriend, the one with the red hair and the cute smile? He shrugged. She's not my... Never mind. I took a deep breath. I just want to know where everybody went and what happened. Edouard took off his top hat and placed it on his lap, staring into the distance. I cannot answer your question, where your friend is. La Reine Noire is a very special wine, and sometimes we say the fumes get to the heads of people who drink them. Make them run around like crazy, dance, even do other things I do not want to mention. He winked at me as if he was telling me a funny joke. I clenched my fists. If he hadn't been so young, I might have punched him for this disinterested tone. She didn't drink the wine. Now tell me where I can find her or I'll call the police. Your friend ate from the grapes, like the other guests. And when Elise came out to play, she took them into the vineyard. Who knows where they will turn up again? People know that La Reine Noire is no normal wine. I grabbed him by the shoulder, forcing him to look at me. I'd had enough. He didn't seem impressed, but he lifted his eyebrows. Ah, wait a second. I found this next to the stomping vet. Maybe it belongs to your friend. He handed me Riley's mobile phone. Damn it, that meant I couldn't even reach her. I knew her code because we often used each other's phones for content creation work. When I opened it, a message popped up. I wouldn't have looked at it if I hadn't recognized the sender. Equinox Eternal. My favorite explorers. Separated. What a tragedy. But do not stray from the route I have laid out for you. 2 more stops await you on the fall route. You may just find what you have lost in one of them. That is, if you are fast enough. Thank you for watching an episode of our Fall Route series. I'm your narrator, Afik, and this episode was written by my lovely partner, Effi, and together we are stories of solstice. If you enjoy this, please leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and see you in the next episode.